Sparta trained boys to die well, not to survive, to die well. And the civilization that built this system didn't collapse because of weakness. It collapsed because it worked too perfectly. When you look at the map of the ancient Peloponnese, Sparta occupies a valley, not a mountain fortress, not a coastal stronghold. A valley open on multiple sides, surrounded by enemies who outnumbered them 10-1. The math didn't favor Sparta. Nothing about Sparta's geography suggested it should dominate Greece for 3 centuries, and yet it did, by making a decision so extreme that even the ancient world found it difficult to watch. The decision was this: the state would own the children. Not symbolically, not the way a nation claims its citizens. Literally. When you hold a newborn in your arms, the weight is perhaps 3 kilograms. Soft skull, eyes that don't yet focus. And in Sparta, before that child ever learned to walk, a council of elders had already decided whether it had the right to live. They examined every newborn for weakness. The word they used, apothetai, meaning the deposits, referred to the place where those who failed were left, a ravine below Mount Taygetos. The Spartans did not call this cruelty, they called it selection. Here we understand why the system that followed was not born from sadism. It was born from a calculation. Sparta was surrounded by a population it had conquered but could never fully control, the helots, Greek-speaking serfs who outnumbered Spartan citizens perhaps 7-1. The only way to hold that ratio was to make every Spartan male a weapon without a single wasted component. For centuries, this logic shaped a machine that had no precedent in the ancient world. The agoge began at 7, not conscription age. Call one boy Demiskos, thousands lived the same path. Imagine Demiskos handed over at 7, not to a school, not to a camp, not to mercy, to a system designed to unmake him before it remakes him. The morning he crossed that threshold, he still had a household name, a family, a home. By nightfall, he had a unit. The family did not disappear, they receded. The Spartan mother who handed him over was not supposed to weep. The ones who wept in public were considered to have failed already. Demiskos slept on a bed he cut himself from reeds along the Eurotas River. Not because reeds were comfortable, but because cutting them required going to the river at night, barefoot, in the dark. The reeds tore the palms. You can see it in the archaeological record. Stress fractures consistent with repetitive grip training on juvenile bone. That was the point. The agoge was not teaching toughness as a metaphor. It was manufacturing it as a physical property of skin and tendon and reflex. Food was rationed below the threshold of comfort, not starvation, deprivation. Enough to function, not enough to feel satisfied. The boys were expected to steal additional food from surrounding farms and kitchens. Demiskos too. If caught, they were punished, not for stealing, but for being caught. The lesson: competence matters more than morality in conditions where survival is non-negotiable. A Spartan soldier who couldn't feed himself behind enemy lines was not a soldier at all. He was a liability, and the agoge had no tolerance for liabilities. But the price has been enormous, not just in pain, in the architecture of a human being. The boys were grouped into agoge herds, Demiskos placed in one. Each herd was led by an older boy, not an adult. This created a layer of authority that was brutal in the way only adolescents can be brutal, without the restraint that comes with consequence. The older boys were evaluated on how well their herds performed. If the herd hardened, the leader was praised. The incentive structure required cruelty, not with weapons, but with psychology. Not just discipline, but the constant presence of shame. Not because they were fearless, but because fear had been made structurally irrelevant. Shame in Sparta operated like gravity, invisible, constant, inescapable. For the boy Demiskos, his entire world was 12 feet in diameter, the width of his agula, The distance from his shoulder to the shoulder of the boy who would one day decide whether to stand beside him on a battle line. Failing in front of him was not embarrassing, it was existential. Here is a fact histories barely note. Boys died in training before they saw a battlefield. Demiskos was raised in that math. Not occasionally, structurally. The system was designed with an acceptable loss rate built in. Every few years, a boy would not come back from a night exercise, a winter crossing, an endurance test that exceeded a body's capacity to adapt. The Spartans recorded these deaths without ceremony. They were, in the system's logic, the cost of quality control. The most revealing test was held annually at the sanctuary of Artemis Orthia, the Dia Mastagosis. Boys were whipped at the altar, not symbolically, to the point of serious injury. Demiskos knew it waited. The one who endured the longest without crying out won honor. The ones who flinched lost standing. And some of them, the sources confirm it, did not survive. It continued. For centuries, Greek visitors came to watch, not in horror, in fascination, because what they were watching was not punishment. It was a demonstration that the inside of a Spartan boy had been reorganized. First, the name became secondary, Demiskos' name too. Then the family, then individual judgment, then fear. The process took roughly 13 years, from 7 to 20, at which point the young man was eligible for the Syssidia, the permanent barracks brotherhood that replaced the family entirely. A Spartan did not live with his wife early in marriage. He visited at night and returned to barracks before dawn. The state required that intimacy be structured so that it could not compromise loyalty. The Spartans had identified, with terrifying precision, every attachment that could soften a soldier, and they had legislated against each one. And here we understand why Sparta produced not just disciplined soldiers, but a specific psychological type. Men for whom pain was information rather than signal to retreat. The helot problem never disappeared, it deepened. Consider a man like Anticrates, not a citizen, but a helot, one of thousands who worked Spartan land under permanent controlled terror. He would have known that every year, young Spartan men were sent out at night as part of their graduation exercise. The Crypteia, officially a kind of secret patrol, in practice, licensed killing. Young men traveled alone, armed with short blades, under orders to eliminate any helot who appeared dangerous. As Sparta's citizen population shrank, the ratio shifted. By the 4th century, fewer than 10,000 full citizens controlled a population 20 times that size. The Crypteia was not a footnote, it was load-bearing infrastructure. Without it, the ratio didn't hold. The contradiction at the center of Sparta is this: the system required excellence, and excellence required culling the weak, and culling the weak reduced the population. And a reduced population required an even more extreme system to hold the same territory. Sparta was not a civilization. It was a feedback loop with a fixed endpoint. Yet right there, inside this machinery of controlled suffering, something unexpected emerged. The Spartan women. The only free women in the Greek world who exercised publicly, who owned property, who spoke in ways other Greek women were not permitted to speak. The logic was unsentimental. A weak mother produces a weak soldier. But the consequence was a class of women whose words entered history. There was a sentence so short it fit on a shield. Come back with your shield or on it. Not poetry, a behavioral specification, delivered by a woman shaped by the same system, who had learned that sentiment was a luxury Sparta could not afford. The system produced the soldiers it intended. At Thermopylae, 300 Spartans held a coastal pass for 3 days against an overwhelming force. Ancient sources said hundreds of thousands. The real number was lower, but still staggering, until betrayal made the position untenable. A local man showed the Persians a mountain path that flanked the Greek position. By morning, the 300 were surrounded. They did not retreat when retreat became logical. They did not disperse when dispersal became possible. The agoge had removed the subroutine that would have triggered either response. They fought until the last man, in a final charge described by Herodotus as deliberate, not a last stand, but a decision. What no monument records. The 300 were not the best Spartans. They were chosen because they all had living sons. The logic was genealogical, not heroic. Even the most famous sacrifice in Western military history was administered with the cold precision of a supply chain. Each of those 300 had spent 13 years inside the agoge. The battle lasted 3 days. The preparation required the first 13 years of a child's life. Sparta fell, not to Persia, but to Thebes. In 371 BC, at the Battle of Leuctra, a Theban general named Epaminondas broke the Spartan phalanx by concentrating force on one flank instead of pushing across the whole line equally. It was a geometric solution to a geometric problem. The phalanx required that every soldier trust every other soldier equally, and that every position in the line hold equal pressure. Apply unequal pressure and the mathematics fail. The Spartan commanders had no answer for it, because the agoge had trained men to die in place, not to adapt in real time. That day, Sparta lost approximately 400 citizen soldiers, nearly a third of its entire fighting population. To replace them at the rate the agoge produced trained men would have required generations the city no longer had. The mathematics of collapse were not recoverable. The citizen population could not recover. Within years, the helot population of Messenia was liberated. The ratio that had required the entire apparatus, the agoge, the cryptia, the barracks brotherhood, no longer existed to justify the machine. But the machine did not stop. It ran for centuries more, in diminished form, a ritual whose original purpose had dissolved, but whose form had become identity. The whipping continued at Artemis Orthia. The reeds were still cut in darkness. Boys were still handed over at 7. Not because Sparta needed soldiers, but because being Spartan meant the willingness to be shaped by a system that no longer remembered why it had been built. The agoge produced a specific kind of courage, the kind that no longer requires a reason. Not bravery in spite of fear, something quieter and stranger. Action in the absence of the machinery that usually generates hesitation. What that was on a battlefield, we know. What it was inside a man's chest, alone, at night, after the campaign was over, that the sources do not record. Spartans did not write. They spoke in short sentences, or not at all. What they built was not text, it was men, shaped by a process so complete that even the men themselves could not describe what had been done to them, because the description would have required access to the person who existed before the process began. Demiskos was handed over at 7 and never returned as himself.